It's the Jack and Joe show, and I speak here with Joe Sansom just days after that Harrison Reed tweet. How are you
What tweet?
doing? How are you doing, Joe?
Very well. I'm very well. Yeah. I hope everyone that replied to me is doing very well as well. Um, Most of you spot on, a few of which less so short, but everyone's entitled to their opinion, including me. So let's get into it, Jack. But let's face it, we wanted to be here in higher spirits today, talking about a good result. We're not, but there's no reason to dwell on it too much because we've got another game coming up on Sunday, and we're still in the FA Cup. So let's try and stay positive.
Yeah, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, um, since I've started my job as a full-time journalist covering Fulham FC, which is the best job in the world. That was as hot as my head has ever been when João Pedro scored. Probably actually was the moment the penalty was given was where my head was hottest. Um, Look, we had some. I mean, I put out a tweet saying that the referee just decided to play on when the clock ticked over 95. I obviously realised it's a minimum. I deleted the tweet because it was just utter head loss and it doesn't look very professional. And then, of course, people say things, and this is the thing. Like people, I've spoke about this so much on my Patreon about how you got to control emotions. In terms of when you're in the position I'm in. But from a fan's point of view, and let's not forget, I'm a fan. You're a fan. You're going to say things that, in the heat of the moment, you feel are correct, but in hindsight, might look a little bit silly or look a little bit erratic. And these things happen,
Mhm.
Joe. And the only reason we say these things is because we care so much about the club and about the fortunes of or potential fortunes of the club. I did say to Jim and Jamie after the game that our season could be over if we lose to Palace and to Spurs, and they said, "Why are you saying that?" And I said, "I'm sorry, my head is just absolutely on Mars." And a tough one, Joe. And it wasn't really. Let's be honest, it wasn't a great performance.
It wasn't, but I have been a little bit surprised at the reaction in terms of people going, "Oh yeah, well, Brighton 100% deserved to win." I think they edged it. I think they were
Yeah,
the team that looked most likely to win, but they created nothing. They created absolutely nothing. Forget the offside goals; they were miles offside. Like it wasn't close.
yeah, they're.
You're going to create loads if you goal hang. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying they're goal hanging, but like that's not a chance creation because the player doesn't exist in the phase of play. Um, in second half was a non-event basically. I didn't particularly like the way we played at all. I thought we sat back too much, and on the break we weren't. We just weren't at it as we normally are. We just didn't look dangerous. The blocked shot from Iwobi was probably closest we came, and it wasn't very close at all. But I just don't think Brighton offered that much either. I thought that they were the better of the two teams. I do agree with that, but I don't think it was, like we were really hanging on for dear life. I just don't think we managed the end of the game very well at all. And although I understood the substitutions, I think they almost invited a bit of pressure back on us. And then forget about the management side of it, just the players. I don't think they dealt with added time very well, which is rare because I think we've been increasingly good at seeing out games recently. I think Wolves away was a great example where added time was almost a non-event.
Yeah,
And if anyone was going to score, it was going to be Fulham with a third goal. So that was disappointing. Um, and yeah, look, it wasn't a good performance. I don't think it was a particularly good game. Um, I think it was two reasonably well matched teams, and Brighton edged it. But just the way we lost is what's the absolute killer, isn't it? I mean, if we'd have lost, let's say one of those two Brighton goals was onside for the sake of this, and we'd have lost 2-1 through a goal through open play when we'd created nothing, I think you sort of hold your hands up and go, fair enough. But the way that it was the last second of the game, even just slightly over the minimum, like you say, 95, 20, 30, 40, whatever it was, and then a penalty given away in that fashion, and then the fact that Leno also went the right way after his heroics last week, it was a good penalty. He shouldn't have it was a good penalty. I'm not saying he should have saved it, but just the fact that he went the right way, it was just a killer blow after killer blow. Hence my hot-headed tweet at full time. I do want to speak about that tweet. Not that it's that important in the grand scheme of
which has
things,
now been deleted,
but
of
just
course.
because which has now been deleted because it got a bit of backlash, and I just sort of thought fair enough. I was a little bit harsh, but I said well done sarcastically to Harrison Reed. I didn't wish injury on the guy. I think it needs to put it into a bit of perspective. But he'll be as gutted as anyone. But the reason that I tweeted it was because I've said for a while that I feel like a lot of our options off the bench, including Reed, are not good enough. I don't think they're good enough. And it was unfair of me to use this penalty as reason to back that up because, as Dan Cook pointed out on the podcast, anyone could have given it away. Sander Berge could have given it away, but he didn't. It was Harrison Reed, and it was one of those really silly ones where the player was going nowhere. Split-second decision, the game's moving so fast, he kicks out, and I was fuming. The reason being it was just so avoidable. So many parts of that goal were avoidable. If Diop puts a leg anywhere else, maybe it doesn't go through his legs, or it goes out for a corner that we don't concede from. If Harrison Reed doesn't kick out, maybe someone else clears it. It was just so avoidable, and that's why my head was hot. But I was a little bit harsh on Reed. But it was it's the worst way to lose a game through an individual error that came off the back of a few individual errors in the build-up. Robinson losing the ball, I actually thought he was fouled. Would need to see it back because it's not shown anywhere. It was almost 50-50. Then the ball coming wide, and no one's really picking up the overlapping run of, I think it was potentially a Dingra who fired it in. Welbeck then went through. It was just loads of stuff happened in one. The reason that it was such a killer was because, obviously, grand scheme of things, forget just this one game in isolation, where Brighton are or now are in the league versus where we are. There's a 4-point swing. They've got a better goal difference, so it's 5 points if you want to overtake them. It's big at this stage of the season. It's big, and we're right in the European mix. But it was a killer blow and a big swing in the results this weekend, not in favour of Fulham.
Yeah, the results didn't go very well for Fulham at all. And what makes me more frustrated is, you look at Tottenham, and we'll talk about Tottenham in a minute, but they could turn it on at any time. The players are coming back. They've got a huge game on Thursday, which is going to take a lot out of them, of course. But morale is a little bit lower at the club now, and then we go into an international break, and then it's the big build up to the Palace game, which is already sort of almost sold out at the Cottage, which is fantastic to hear. Like, there's a lot of angst about that game because it really does. It's a massive, massive game. It's the biggest game I can remember for Fulham in a while. If I was a Bournemouth fan, I would be saying similar things that you said about Harrison Reed, about Kepa Arrizabalaga, because I was watching that game as a neutral, hoping for a draw, really. And I was quite enjoying the Bournemouth performance, and I was quite enjoying the fact that Spurs were losing. But what's he doing? I mean, that again going nowhere, and you could see that coming a mile off. You couldn't see the penalty we gave away coming a mile off because it was sort of impact. But when keepers rush out of their goal and knowing that a player's going to go around them and just try and take them down, regardless, they're going away from goal, like towards the byline where the Spurs player was going. I think it might have been Son. What is he doing? And that's just another example of just a poor decision made erratically by a player to cost points in a game. Albeit it was good news for us, really. But yeah, Newcastle.
And also Kepa did that in their last game as well at Brighton. I've just remembered that.
Yeah.
So they lost 2-1 to Brighton. The first goal was a João Pedro penalty, which gives us PTSD. But ultimately, it was given away by Kepa doing the exact same thing.
It's stupid, isn't it? Yeah, Newcastle winning last night was infuriating because I didn't think they played.
Rubbish game, that wasn't it?
Yeah, they didn't play particularly well. And it's interesting now because we've sat here on this show for many years talking about wanting teams to, not pick up points because it would help us to avoid relegation. And now it's about us trying to get into the European places, which is some flip and testament to the job that Marco Silva's done. I had a huge amount of respect for Silva and what he had to say after the game. The press conference was 3.5 minutes. In fact, it was 3 minutes long. The press officer came to me, and I sort of was like, I don't really have anything else to add because you've sort of covered everything that I sort of was going to ask anyway. He basically said that the loss was our fault, and he didn't want to sugarcoat it. He didn't want to say, "Oh, it should have been a penalty and the time should have gone." And like I was expecting him to be absolutely furious at the fact the game was still going on when the penalty was given, because that was my feeling. But perhaps I wasn't taking, like you said, you texted the group chat saying there was a couple of stoppages in those early time, and I hadn't really taken that into consideration at all. And then where was I going to go with this? Oh yeah, so obviously it's a very, very disappointing defeat. And I think it highlighted for me the injuries we have including Traore. And I just
Yeah,
think that with any sub that we brought on, I had no sort of confidence that they would change the game. And I do think, Joe, you're right in saying that Brighton had a lot of sort of final third territory in that second half, and we had hardly any. Even Raul Jimenez, the shot he had wide at the start of the second half,
yeah,
just doesn't get his head up. Like, at least get your head up and assess your options before basically blasting it into the crowd. Albeit very well taken goal and a very good assist from Iwobi. And
yeah,
if it wasn't for those moments of magic, and let's say we come away with a 2-0 defeat, let's just say, we would have come away from that thinking that was one of the worst performances of the season so far. A lot of slack for Smith Rowe, which I thought was quite harsh, because I thought Smith Rowe in the first half actually came close a couple of occasions. But again, this argument that he goes missing in games is also a fact that he hasn't played 90 minutes at all this season. And I think that's more due to the fact that we've got another option in Pereira to come off the bench rather than just down to Smith Rowe. It's like with Jimenez and Muniz, you're always going to put the second option on to see if we can sort of change a game or get a winner or get another goal, whatever. And yeah, I'm at a low ebb with Fulham right now, which is not a great place to be in. But we play Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham next, and with that comes like a complete unknown what you're going to get with them. They've obviously got some players coming back: Romero, Van der Ven, Maddison, Solanke. They're starting to take shape again. Udogi coming back as well, which is huge for them. I think we really miss Sasha Lukic, and I really am annoyed that he's going to be out of this one as well, because I feel like we're going to have to still play that 5 at the back system, which you've only done once at home this season. I believe it was against Ipswich, and when we produced not a very good performance in that game. It was a 2-2 draw. The Southampton game we played Josh King, and I think that was in a 4.
yeah. But I suppose Bournemouth we played the 5 as well, and that was a crap
Oh,
performance
was
as
it
well
Bournemouth?
at
Oh, yeah,
home.
you're completely correct then. Yeah, sorry.
No, Ipswich was as well, but I remember Ipswich at half time. He took one of the centre backs off. I think it was Diop, and we
Yeah,
switched back
that
to a
was it.
4, and then we never saw it until Wolves. Yeah, I don't know what to expect with Spurs, Jack, because you saw the lineup they started against Bournemouth. There's a few players still on the bench there. You don't know if Son's going to start. He's been sort of in and out of the team lately. Obviously, came off the bench and scored the penalty. They were making a lot of change around the 45 and then the 60th minute mark. They've obviously got the big second leg, like you say, against Alkmaar on Thursday. They're 1-0 down in that one. I mean, ideal scenario for Fulham, I think, is that it goes to extra time, just additional fatigue. Let's take it. But ultimately, yeah, no idea what we're going to get with Tottenham. I didn't watch the game live against Bournemouth, I must admit, but I've watched extended highlights on Match of the Day and a few other places, and they looked awful from what I saw.
They were terrible.
And I don't know how they got a point out of that game, other than a couple of, well, let's face it was a cross that went in.
Yeah.
How's your luck? And then an individual error from Kepa. Aside from that, there was no real chance creation at all. But let's face it, we can get at them. But I want to see a lot more from our attacking players in this one. I agree with you about the Smith Rowe. I don't necessarily think he should be sort of pinpointed for his performance against Brighton, but I thought he was poor. I thought Iwobi was poor. I thought he did very, very well for the goal, and I was surprised that people have named him my man of the match. I don't think he was. I thought he was poor other than that.
I don't really have a man of the match.
Jimenez.
I don't have a man of the match.
Yeah, if I was going to give our man of the match to someone, I think I'd struggle. I think I'd even potentially say someone like Castagne, and I don't necessarily think he was great. I just thought it was one of his better performances. I think the back 5 suits him far more than the back 4. That's for sure. And I thought he did okay against Mitoma. He's a very tough opponent. I thought Pereira didn't offer much going forward. I thought that Robinson had a very, very quiet game by his standards. Muniz coming off the bench. Willian didn't really see anything from them, and then Sessegnon, there wasn't really enough time for him to make an impact, and I think he should have come on far earlier, if I'm honest, when people were tiring. Not sure what to expect in terms of the lineup, Jack. I think we can't expect too many changes. I think that Jimenez will keep his place up front based on him scoring a goal. But I would not be surprised if Muniz came in from the start, although I don't think his performance particularly merited it at the Amex on Saturday. I personally, based on what I saw, I would really, really hope that Adama is back.
Yeah.
But I'm going to assume for the sake of this that he's not, just because we haven't heard anything yet. And I would love to see Ryan Sessegnon get a start. And I'd love to see him start ahead of Smith Rowe on that sort of left-hand side behind the forward. I'd love to see him and Robinson linking up. I think that Sessegnon will do a little bit more work defensively, but also just have a little bit more dynamism going forward. Smith Rowe, yes, very intricate. I don't think this system, when it's a back five, suits him. I think he's far more suited when he's either on the left or in the middle of a 4-3-3 formation. So almost like we saw him at Old Trafford when he was drifting wide on the left. I think that's the best he's played for us other than Forest for most of the season. I thought that he was just far more involved, even if the end product wasn't quite there for the full shift. But in terms of the scoreline, Jack, and the rest of the team, I honestly couldn't tell you. I think the rest of the team will probably be the same. Scoreline could be absolutely anything. I don't know what to say, because Spurs were absolutely rubbish in the first half against Ipswich, ran out 4-1 winners. They were absolutely terrible against Bournemouth, 2-2 draw. You don't know what the score's going to be in the Europa League, but I am going to back Fulham to return here with 3 points, to go into the international break on a high, just based on how I think that we will react and how we reacted previously based on poor performances. And I'm going to go with a 2-1 Fulham win.
Yeah, we're recording on Tuesday, which is difficult because obviously Spurs play on Thursday, Ange will speak on Friday, Silva speaks on Friday, and then we'll find out what's going on with Adama. I'm actually going to disagree with you, and I think we're going to go back to a 4 at the back.
Okay.
So this actually, I don't think maybe this is what I want to happen. Basically,
this is what you want. Yeah.
Leno, Robinson, Castagna, Anderson, Bassi, Berger, Pereira, Smith Rowe, because we've done that before. We did it at the start of the season. I don't see why we couldn't do it. If we get Pereira tracking back a lot and doing a lot of off the ball work and being that sort of number 8 that does all that hard work in the middle of the park, then I'm okay with that. Smith Rowe is the 10. And they can sort of swap as well if need be. And then I'd have Iwobi off the right, Sessegnon off the left, and then Jimenez or Muniz down the middle. Maybe Jimenez, because he scored last week.
Yeah.
And that's only if Adama's not ready. If Adama's ready, Adama right, Iwobi left, and then Sessegnon off the bench. I really want to see us go back to a 4. I think at home, a 5 is not going to suit us very, very well. I think we can get at this team, and by playing an extra defender, I know they've got quality going forward. I think that will stifle us going further up the pitch, where I think we can create chances. I think that just because Lukic is out does not mean the whole system has to change, even though it has obviously previously, against Brighton. But I just feel a 5 at home, even against Spurs, I would see as a little bit negative. Especially the Spurs team who are bottom half of the table, and it's not like they're in the top 4 chasing Champions League. We're in the top 10 trying to chase Europe, and I think that we need to bring the game to them. As Marco says, we don't fear any team in any stadium, so why play a slightly more defensive formation against a team who have had a track record of being really poor this season? And look, after 15 seconds against Bournemouth, Evan Nilsson should have made it 1-0 to Bournemouth. You get Pereira or Smith Rowe and Jimenez or Rodrigo pressing very high, and you're always going to get opportunities if we win the ball high up the pitch. We saw that against Brighton in the home fixture with Alex Iwobi's goal. Iwobi and Adama pressing high as well, putting those players under pressure, Van de Ven or Romero, whoever it is. We will get chances. We beaten 3-0 last season at home, and there's no reason why we can't do the same again. Obviously, Spurs have a lot of quality, but so do we. And at home, I'd back us to beat anyone any day.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And look, this is not a game I'm fearing at all. So I agree with you. I would like to see a return to the 4. It's whether Pereira can fill in that job, because
that's the thing. Yeah.
Although I agree again that we shouldn't change the formation. Hopefully next season we don't have to, because we have someone that is more similar to a Lukic mould of player.
Yeah.
Same with Berger. If Berger's out, I know Lukic can fill in there, but they're not the exact same player. I think that the profiles we've got in midfield, I include Pereira, Kearney, Harrison Reed in this. I also include Josh King, not in terms of there being anything wrong with any of these players, but in terms of the profiles we've got. They're all different to maybe what the system needs right now, aside from maybe Josh King, where there is a role for him, but there's just people ahead in the queue. It'll be really interesting to see. I'm excited for this one. Hopefully it's a good atmosphere to send the guys into the international break on a high, and then we've got a couple of weeks before that huge game, which I'm already thinking about that and more nervous about that than I am about Tottenham, which is, I hope the team aren't, but I am. And I guess we're allowed to be, we're fans, because I want to go to Wembley so much. for a domestic competition. I know there's the argument, and it's completely fair about semi-finals shouldn't be at Wembley. I kind of agree, but
Yeah,
they are,
but they
and I
are, and
want
you
to be
can't
there.
change that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've been a massive advocate on Twitter about what the Craven Cottage should do.
yeah,
Viva El Fulham is the shout. My argument
yeah,
is that half the fan base don't really know the song because it's not played enough
yeah,
for people to know it. I only learnt it off going to Fulham away games and hearing this chant that I wasn't really familiar of, and then sort of learning the words off that, and then looking it up as to what the song was. And obviously, I don't listen to it every day, but I could definitely recite the lyrics right now.
yeah.
Not that you're going to ask me to. Okay, and in terms of,
Spotify Rap is going to come out later this year if we get to the FA Cup final and be grim reading, is all I'll say.
I'd love to see Alex Iwobi do some sort of as the journalist brought up
That'd be funny.
in the
Yeah,
press
yeah,
conference the other day. That was really good fun. In terms of a score prediction for the Spurs game, I don't have a Scooby Doo,
yeah,
but I will back Fulham because Tottenham just love to do Tottenham things, and that is concede goals and just make themselves look a little bit silly.
yeah.
Since I think since I was looking at this yesterday for Patreon, since we last played them, they've only won 4 Premier League games, which is pretty grim. And that was back
Yeah.
in like November we played them. I'm going to back Fulham to win this by a balmy 3-2. However, we're 3-1 up and they get a goal back.
Okay.
And I think
I like it.
I think that's that for today, really. We don't want
Yeah.
to talk about Brighton anymore. I'm looking forward to this international break. I feel very worn out with Fulham. And I feel like I need a couple of weeks just to sort of reset because of that huge game against Crystal Palace. And Joe, that's basically what's been on my mind every time I'm about to go to sleep. It's almost, the Wembley way and then the Palace Ultras blocking that way because they're the team we have
Everyone
to
tying
beat.
their shoelace.
That Palace game is massive. I'm really glad that it's sold out already and it's got loads of attention and everyone's sort of trying to get their tickets for the game. I think it's going to be a very special atmosphere regardless of the kickoff time, Joe. Obviously, that is a hindrance at 12:15. However, the fans have just got to turn up, and it feels like the way that it's sold out already, it feels like everyone's on board here.
Yeah, I think I've been saying online, I think I don't just say it. It's not really a call to ask. I think everyone would do it, but it's one of our biggest games at home in years. No one, not a single Fulham fan alive or sadly passed away, has ever seen Fulham win a major trophy.
Yeah.
And that is the truth. That is a fact. And this is a real chance to get to a semi-final and go one step further. And we just need to bring our A game as fans and make it as hostile a crowd for Crystal Palace as possible, because it would be the exact same the other way around, I'm sure. We need to do everything we can off the pitch to maximise our chance of going through. And, I just want us to look back at the end of that game and just think, you know what, regardless of what happens, the atmosphere was as good as it could have been on that day. And I think that will happen the same way it happened with Derby in the playoffs. So I do honestly think that when the Cottage is rocking, I think that it gets under the skin of the opposition teams. I really do. And I do think it makes a big difference.
Throughout the years, last 10, 15 years, the FA Cup semi-finals, you've had teams in there like as recently as Coventry, as Sheffield United, but you've had Watford, Crystal Palace, Southampton, all get to semi-finals, all have their big days at Wembley. Even if it doesn't result in getting to the final, Everton have been in the FA Cup final recently, semi-finals, they played Liverpool and stuff like that. And Fulham have just, it's just been out. I can probably name nearly every single team in the Premier League right now who have made it to an FA Cup semi-final. Aston Villa, Leicester won the whole thing. And Fulham just haven't ever had that experience. So for me, it's not about I want to win the FA Cup as much as I do. It's just I just want to get into that semi-final and have that big day out and just be part of that big media conversation, albeit it might be quite tedious, but that is because, not enough people are paying attention to Fulham this season. And it's annoying because at the Friday press conference, some guy said to me, he was like, I can't believe how few people are here given Fulham's season. And I'm like, yeah, we've had such a good season. And then you go and lose to Brighton and then people lose interest again because they're out of the race. So it's difficult, but what will get people interested is Fulham getting to a semi-final. And
yeah, Jack, I agree about, right now the priority is Wembley, like we both said, but we're not going to get a better chance to win competition than this with the teams that are left. Because even Man City, and don't get me wrong, let's say we beat Crystal Palace and let's say Man City beat Bournemouth, they're the last team you want to face at Wembley. That's an immediate mood ruiner.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're not the Man City of yesteryear, of last year, let alone yesteryear.
Exactly.
I mean, is it yesteryear? Because it was yesteryear, whatever. But ultimately, they are beatable. They are. And I think that's the same for every team in it, including Fulham. Don't get me wrong. Crystal Palace fans right now are having the exact same conversation. And they're probably a little bit more confident than we are based on the form they're in and based on the fact they turned up a couple of weeks ago and turned us over. But let's not pretend that there's a massive quality gap between us and Crystal Palace. There's not. I would say they're two very evenly matched teams with two good managers who, on their day, could both probably batter each other if one's off their game and one's on it. Equally, it could end in a ball draw and go all the way through extra time and penalties. But if it does, we're at home. That's a big advantage.
There's a scenario where, Viva Fulham isn't played before the game, but it could be played before a penalty shootout, like Everton did. To cheer up the fans, even though we won in the shootout, they were trying to cheer up the fans with their anthems as well. It's just popped up on my phone that Constitution Hill fell in his race, which has basically ruined everyone's ACCAs and day one of Cheltenham, although mine was already done and dusted by the second race. But thank you so much for watching and listening today. We're going to talk more about that Palace game during the international break and in the lead up to that as well. I think that might be on the pod feed as well. This is the final game before the last international break of the season. And Joe, I really don't want to be talking in 2 or 3 weeks' time saying we're now in a beach period on the beach, because it is ironic, because in the last 2 seasons, I've been absolutely delighted to talk about us being on the beach at this time of the year. Now it would genuinely drive me to, almost River Thames with bricks in pockets sort of situation.
The beach that I'd be on is the Thames when the tide goes out, and it's like all the rocks and stones just battering myself, because that would be awful. I mean, like you say, there is a chance it's season's over in a couple of weeks, but equally, in a couple of weeks we could be planning a trip to Wembley.
Oh mate!
And equally, we could be in the European race going into a run-in. And a lot's been made of our run-in. It's really hard on paper, and I agree, but it works both ways. If we could go to Villa and get 3 points, it means more.
Yeah. To
use that horrible phrase, because you're taking points away from a rival as well. Same with Bournemouth.
Huge.
Same with Man City last day of the season. So what an exciting end to the season. I hope that it continues to be exciting and not meaningless.
Would be amazing if we went into that Man City game who have nothing to play for, knowing that if we won, we'd go into Europe. That would be insane.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very, very possible scenario. Obviously, everyone playing at the same time as well. I do want to get to Wembley very, very badly, but I do realise that getting tickets for Wembley last time for the playoff final was one of the most stressful experiences I've ever done, buying tickets for anything. And I think I'll buy a ticket. I would, if we get there, buy a ticket for insurance, then hopefully end up in the press box to represent Fulham in the media. Thank you so much for watching. Joe, thanks so much for being here. I'm sure you feel better after today.
Pleasure. Yeah, no, I feel a lot better. Hopefully my mentions take 5 minutes off.
Yeah. Always count to 10 before tweeting, unless you can see the 95th minute goal.
Unless you're me, and then count to about 60, because I'm not doing that again.
Well, one thing that is meant to, you can tweet things that obviously people disagree with, but don't abuse individual people who tweet. It's just opinions. Football's all about opinions. You don't have to be so aggressive in disagreeing. Then again, me saying that's not going to change anything. So take care, guys, and we will see you next week.